This is not a hero story. This is what war actually leaves behind. They had us boxed in tight. Every one of us. Out of everything that happened later, that place was the worst fighting I ever saw. Nothing else came close. The Second World War touched just about everyone who was alive back then. You could not live through those years without feeling it somehow. This is my story. My name is Harry Shaw Jr., but everyone who knew me well called me Pete. Like a lot of American boys my age, what pushed me to serve was the attack on Pearl Harbor. That was the moment the war became real for our country. For me, though, the pain hit closer than headlines or radio reports. One of my closest friends growing up was Carlo Corral. We had been side by side since grade school, all the way through high school. His brother was serving in the Navy and was stationed at Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked. He never came home. After that, nothing could have stopped me from joining. I enlisted when I was 17 years old. I was in such a hurry they could barely process me fast enough. As the United States got pulled deeper into the war, they needed men everywhere, and I was ready. I also knew exactly where I wanted to serve. Carlo and I had talked about it for years. He told me, "Pete, we grew up together. You are my best friend." Then he said, "We are joining the Navy." There was just one problem. I was colorblind. If the doctors figured that out during the physical exam, my chances of getting into the Navy were done. The test depended on reading numbers hidden inside colored dots. When the day came, Carlo stepped up first. Before he went in, he told me, "Listen carefully. When I call out the numbers, you remember them." Inside, he started reading them off loud. 99. 44. 79. Then they called for the next man. That was me. The examiner told me he was going to flip through a book filled with colored dots, and inside each page would be a number. He said I should tell him what number I saw. I already knew what Carlo had called out, so when the pages turned, I repeated them. 99. 34. 47. Then something went wrong. One page did not turn properly. The doctor stopped and looked at me and said, "How did you know that one?" I answered him plain and simple. I said, "I am going into the army." He dumped a tray of colored pieces onto the desk and told me to pick out the red ones. I said it again. "I am going into the army." That was the end of that. They let me through. We went through basic training in a place called Tar Paper City, down in Dothan, Alabama. There were no real barracks. No proper buildings at all. They had wooden posts stuck into the ground, wrapped with tar paper, and cots set right on the sand. That was where we slept. Later on, as the army needed more combat troops, they sent me to the United Kingdom to finish training. By then I was assigned to the 283rd Field Artillery Battalion. A few months after that, I got my first taste of real combat during the biggest seaborne invasion the world had ever seen. D-Day. On June 6, 1944, I landed at Utah Beach in Normandy. The infantry went in first and cleared the beach of German defenses. Once they did that, it was our job to bring the heavy artillery ashore. We came in on landing ships. When the front of those ships dropped, we drove straight out, pulling trailers loaded with equipment behind us. Everything came with us. We moved mostly at night. German aircraft were always up there, watching the roads. We were not allowed to use headlights or flashlights. Instead, the vehicles ahead had what they called cat eyes, tiny lights about an inch long. That was all you could see. Wherever that jeep or command car went, we followed. All we could see were those two little dots glowing in the dark. That was how we moved, night after night, hoping not to get spotted or shot from the sky. And that was just the beginning. They had us surrounded. Every direction was closed off. Out of everything I went through later, that moment stands out as the hardest fighting I ever faced. Nothing else compared to it. The Second World War reached into every home back then. If you were alive during those years, you felt it in one way or another. This is my story. My name is Harry Shaw Jr., but everyone called me Pete. Like most young American men, the moment that pushed me into uniform was the attack on Pearl Harbor. That was when the war stopped feeling distant and became personal for the whole country. For me, it became personal in an even deeper way. I grew up with a boy named Carlo Corral. We had known each other since we were kids, all the way from grade school through high school. His older brother served in the Navy and was stationed at Pearl Harbor when the attack happened. He never made it back. After that, there was no hesitation left in me. I signed up when I was only 17 years old. I was so eager that the paperwork could not move fast enough for me. By then, the United States was fully committed to the fight, and they needed soldiers everywhere. I was ready to be one of them. I also knew where I wanted to go. Carlo and I had talked about it for years. He looked at me one day and said, "Pete, we have been together our whole lives. You are my closest friend." Then he said, "Let us join the Navy together." But there was a catch. I could not see colors properly. If the doctors discovered that during my physical exam, my chances with the Navy would be over. The test relied on spotting numbers hidden inside patterns of colored dots. When inspection day came, Carlo went in before me. Right before his turn, he whispered, "Pay attention. Remember the numbers I say." Inside the room, he started calling them out. 99. 44. 79. Then they called for the next man. That was me. The examiner explained that he would flip through a book filled with colored circles, and each page had a number hidden inside. My job was to say the number I saw. Since I already knew what Carlo had read, I repeated them as the pages turned. 99. 34. 47. Then the test stalled. One page did not flip the way it should have. The doctor paused and stared at me. He asked how I knew that number. I told him straight. I said, "I am going into the army." He spread a tray of colored pieces across the desk and ordered me to separate the red ones. I looked at him and repeated myself. "I am going into the army." That ended the exam. They passed me. Basic training sent us to a place called Tar Paper City near Dothan, Alabama. There were no real buildings there. No proper barracks. Just wooden posts stuck in the ground, wrapped in tar paper, with cots laid directly on sand. That was where we slept and lived. Later, as the need for combat troops grew, they shipped me overseas to the United Kingdom to finish training. By then, I was part of the 283rd Field Artillery Battalion. Not long after that, I found myself preparing for the largest invasion the world had ever seen. D-Day. On June 6, 1944, I landed at Utah Beach in Normandy. The infantry went in first and fought their way through the German defenses. Once the beach was secured, our job began. We brought the heavy guns ashore. We rode in landing ships. When the front ramp dropped, we drove straight out, hauling trailers loaded with equipment behind us. Everything we needed came with us. Most of our movement happened at night. German planes watched the roads constantly. We were forbidden from using headlights or any kind of visible light. Instead, the vehicles ahead had tiny markers called cat eyes, no bigger than an inch. That was all we followed. Wherever the jeep or command car went, we followed those two small glowing dots through the darkness. That was how we moved, night after night, trying not to be seen, hoping the sky above stayed quiet. And that was only the start of what was coming. The fighting on the Eastern Front between Germany and the Soviet Union was something different altogether. It was personal. Brutal. The Germans knew the Red Army would show them no mercy, not after what the Nazi regime had done. You could feel that fear in the air by the time we pushed deeper into Europe. I saw the results of that cruelty with my own eyes when we helped liberate Dachau. It was the first concentration camp, and nothing could have prepared me for what was inside. Men and women had been beaten, starved, worked to death, and murdered there. Some of the prisoners were still alive when we arrived, but many of them were barely hanging on. They were sick, skeletal, and dying right in front of us. When my unit, the 283rd Field Artillery Battalion, reached the camp, smoke was still rising from the crematoriums. Those images never left me. Even now, more than 70 years later, they stay clear in my mind. Clear enough that there are things I still cannot put into words, especially not out loud. But our job was done. We had done what we were sent there to do. Not long after that, it was finally time to go home. In January of 1946, we went down to the channel to board the ship back to the United States. When we pulled in, the docks were packed solid. You could barely move. People were everywhere, waving flags and cheering. It was cold, real cold, but half of them did not even have hats on. Nobody cared. They were just happy to see us coming home. My return caught my family completely by surprise. They did not even know I was back in the country until the phone rang in the middle of the night. It was 1:45 in the morning. My father answered. I said, "Dad, I am at the bus station." He said, "Who is this?" I told him, "It is Pete. Your son." He paused and said, "You are where?" I said it again. "I am at the bus station." He told me my brother was working the midnight shift and would not be done until 7:30 in the morning. He did not know who could come get me. I told him not to worry, that I would take a taxi. While I was waiting, my father called the place where my brother worked and told them to get word to him that his brother was down at the depot. When I finally got there, my brother was walking past the car, not even planning to stop. Then he looked again and said, "I bet that is Pete." It was. I walked through the door at 2 o'clock in the morning on February 9th. After all that time, I was finally home. All these years later, people still remember my service. In November of 2016, I was awarded the French Legion of Honor. That is an award given by the government of France to soldiers who fought on French soil. I never expected anything like that. More than 70 years after the war ended, it still shapes the way I see the world. I believe you have got to be kind to people. You have got to try to understand them. I remember people overseas, even in England, telling us how sorry they were that we had to leave our homes to come fight in their country. The same thing in France, and especially in Poland. They had suffered so much, and they felt bad that we had to go through it too. I used to tell them, "We have to do this." But the fact that they cared like that, that stays with you. It makes you realize how important it is to understand people, to respect them, and to treat them right. Before I finish, I want to say thank you to everyone listening to this story. These memories matter. Not just for me, but for the generations that come after. If sharing what I lived through helps even one person understand history a little better, then it is worth telling. Please keep listening, keep sharing these stories, and help make sure that what happened is never forgotten.